When I moved into apartment 3B, I honestly thought I'd scored a miracle. $800 a month for a one-bedroom with hardwood floors, vaulted ceilings, and a decent view of the city skyline? It felt like fate handing me a break after the worst year of my life. A nasty breakup, a job that slowly bled me dry, and a growing need to escape the suffocating suburbs where I'd spent 25 years pretending to be someone else. The apartment was old but charming, part of a 3-story brick building from the 1960s tucked into a quiet corner of downtown, mostly occupied by elderly tenants who kept to themselves. I met the landlord, Mr. Cantor, a wiry man in his 60s who had nicotine-stained fingers and eyes that never quite met yours, and he seemed eager to hand over the keys without much in the way of a background check. That should have been my first red flag. But I was desperate and exhausted, and the place felt, well, peaceful. For the first few nights, it was everything I needed, the hum of city life muted by thick plaster walls, the creak of old pipes giving the space a kind of lived-in comfort, and the rare quiet that comes from living alone. But on the 6th night, I woke up at 3:42 a.m. to the sound of tapping, slow, deliberate tapping, coming from behind the wall next to my bed. Not above, not below, not a neighbor, the wall. I froze, heart hammering, ears straining, then silence. I laughed it off the next morning. Old buildings settle, pipes knock. It was probably nothing, but that night, the tapping came back, louder, more erratic. 3 short taps, a pause, 2 more, another pause. It felt patterned, like code. I knocked back once out of dumb curiosity, and what I heard chilled my blood. A soft, breathy laugh, so faint I questioned whether I'd imagined it. The next day I called Mr. Cantor and asked if there were maintenance tunnels or shared vents in the walls. He said no, just insulation and studs. I asked about the neighboring unit. Empty, he said, had been for months. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept thinking about that laugh, about the fact that someone or something had responded to me. Days passed. I tried to ignore it, drown it out with podcasts and music. But then, things started disappearing. My toothbrush was damp when I hadn't used it. A granola bar I swear I left on the counter vanished. My phone was slightly out of place one morning, its battery mysteriously drained. The paranoia crept in slowly, like fog rolling in under a doorframe. I changed my locks. I installed a camera facing my front door. I told myself I was just being anxious, letting fear fill in the blanks. But then the notes started. Slipped under my door, always at night, always typed. The first one read, "I like your humming, do it again tonight." The second, "That color looks good on you, the one from Tuesday." The third, "I miss the girl who lived here before you. She used to read aloud." No name, no threats, just watching. I showed them to the building manager. He shrugged and said he'd check the security footage. He never followed up. I asked a neighbor across the hall, a sweet older woman named Lorna, if she'd seen anyone lurking around. She just smiled and said, "That apartment's always had activity. Nothing violent, just odd." I stopped asking questions after that. I didn't want to hear what she meant by activity. I started leaving lights on at night, sleeping with a knife under my pillow. I scoured the walls for holes, cameras, vents, anything. I found none. Until one night, while dusting behind the bookshelf, I noticed something strange. One part of the wall sounded hollow, different, like it wasn't fully sealed. I pressed my ear to it and heard it again. Breathing. Slow, steady, human breathing, not mine. That night, I didn't sleep at all, and in the morning, taped to my bathroom mirror, was a new note, one that didn't come from under the door. It simply read, "You're warmer than she was." I didn't leave the apartment that day. Not really. I took my laptop to the kitchen table, kept the blinds open, and jumped at every creak, every car horn, every shifting shadow across the floor. I couldn't stop staring at that note on the bathroom mirror. Still perfectly centered, the tape corners too precise, like whoever left it had all the time in the world. And it wasn't just the words that unnerved me, it was the fact that it hadn't come from under the door. Whoever left it had been inside. Inside while I slept, or while I showered, or maybe while I was brushing my teeth with the same toothbrush they might have touched. I ripped the bookshelf away from the wall later that afternoon, heart racing, and tapped again on that hollow section I'd noticed before. This time, I pressed hard enough that the plaster cracked just a little, revealing a thin seam, almost invisible, like the outline of a panel. It wasn't just a hollow wall. It was a crawl space. I didn't dare try to open it. Not yet, not alone. Instead, I called the cops, reported a possible break-in. And when the officer came by, Officer Daniels, young, polite, and clearly skeptical, I showed him the notes, the toothbrush, the wall. He inspected everything, nodded gravely, and told me to consider installing more cameras. He didn't even take the notes with him. When he left, I felt more alone than ever. That night, I pushed my dresser in front of the bedroom door and set my phone to record audio while I slept. I didn't expect to capture anything, but when I listened to it the next morning, at around 3:47 a.m., I heard it. A quiet shuffle, the faint creak of floorboards, and then, terrifyingly close to the mic, a whisper. "She sleeps with the lights on now." I dropped the phone. I almost threw up. My entire body went cold and my vision tunneled. That voice hadn't come from inside the room. It had come from inside the wall. I took the day off work, called a contractor to inspect the apartment, but they couldn't come until Friday. I barely made it through that week. Every night the sounds got louder, breathing, dragging, scratching. Sometimes I heard something like a nail tapping on the inside of the wall near the kitchen, slow and rhythmic like someone drumming their fingers out of boredom. I stopped cooking. I stopped sleeping. I barely left the couch, and every time I blinked, I saw that note on the mirror. I kept every light on 24/7, and still it didn't help. Friday finally came, and the contractor, Ben, mid-40s, calm, no nonsense, showed up around 11 a.m. I showed him the wall, the notes, and he didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He ran his hand along the baseboard, knocked on the panel, then looked at me and said, "You know this unit used to have an access tunnel, right? From before the last renovation." My mouth went dry. No, I hadn't known. He pried the panel open using a flathead and revealed a dark, narrow space, maybe 2 feet wide, running the length of the building, lined with dusty insulation, frayed wiring, and cobwebs thick enough to choke a dog. It smelled like old sweat and rot. At the far end, we saw it. An empty soda can, a balled-up granola wrapper, a discarded sock. Someone had been in here, recently. Ben stepped back and said, "I'm not touching this. Call your landlord. Or the cops." But I knew the cops wouldn't help. Not really. And Mr. Cantor was nowhere to be found. His voicemail full, his office door locked. So that night, I installed a second camera. This one aimed at the closet where the crawlspace was hidden. I kept the audio recording too, just in case. I sat in bed, knife in hand, heart pounding so loud I thought I'd pass out from sheer adrenaline. At 2:58 a.m., my phone lit up, motion detected. I opened the app and saw it, the panel in the closet shifting, slowly, like someone inside was gently pushing it open. Then a pale, thin hand reached out, not fully, just far enough to curl its fingers around the frame. It stayed like that for 13 minutes, perfectly still. Then it pulled back, and the panel slid shut. I watched the footage over and over until the sun came up. I didn't call anyone. I didn't leave. I just sat there, holding my knife, as a fourth note waited for me in the kitchen that morning, propped up against the fruit bowl I never used. "We're getting used to each other," it read. "Aren't you?" I stared at that fourth note for hours before I finally touched it, afraid it might somehow burn me or vanish if I blinked too long. But it just sat there, innocently perched between two bruised apples like it belonged. "We're getting used to each other." The words ran laps in my mind, over and over, until they didn't sound like words anymore, just a drone, like white noise that made everything else feel unreal. I didn't eat that day. I didn't shower. I unplugged every vent cover in my apartment and checked under every piece of furniture. I opened all the drawers, emptied the closets, even peeled up part of the carpet near the baseboards in the hallway. But it was useless. I could feel it in my bones. They weren't coming in. They were already here. I stopped pretending it was just one person. I don't know when I made that mental shift, but it felt like the only explanation. The breathing had changed. It was layered, off rhythm. I would sit still in the living room at night, lights blazing like a hospital, and just listen. There'd be slow breathing from the wall behind the TV, another faint one from the vent near the ceiling. Once, I swear I heard one above me, pressed into the plaster of the ceiling itself. And there were other noises too, sounds I couldn't explain. A faint metallic clinking, like buttons or coins. Paper rustling, faint giggles, the occasional groan that made my skin crawl. I started sleeping in the tub with the door locked. It was the only place that felt sealed. I bring my knife, a blanket, and my phone, and lie there until sleep took me out of desperation. On the fourth night in the tub, I woke to find a note had been slid under the bathroom door. "You're safest in here," it said. "We don't like the hail." That was the first time I cried in days. Not quiet sobs either. Real, body-racking, animal crying. The kind that empties you. That same morning, I heard a knock at the door. A woman stood there, mid-30s, thin and pale, eyes darting like she hadn't slept in years. "You live in 3B?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't introduce herself. "I lived there before you, last year, for 3 months. Then I broke my lease. I had to." Her voice was already shaking. "Did you find the closet yet?" My stomach dropped. "The crawlspace?" I asked. She shook her head violently. "No, the closet. The other one." She didn't wait for an invitation. Just walked in like we were at war together. She went straight to my bedroom, dropped to her knees beside the left wall, and started pulling up the carpet with her bare hands. And sure enough, there it was. Another seam. Hidden beneath the padding and nailed down trim. Together, we pulled back the panel, and there, behind it, was a second hidden compartment. Deeper, darker, carved into the structure itself. Not a crawl space, a room. Or maybe a den? There was a moldy mattress, ratty blankets, a stack of books, some of them mine, a pair of my socks, and a Polaroid, face down. When I picked it up, my hands trembled. It was me, sleeping, in the tub. She didn't react. "They watched me too," she said, her voice flat. They only come out when you stop noticing them. When you stop reacting, they get bolder. I asked who they were. She didn't answer, just turned and walked out without another word. I never saw her again. That night, I called the police again. I showed them the den, the Polaroid, the mattress. But when they arrived, it was gone. Sealed. Like it had never been there. Even the panel we'd pulled open was flush and painted over again, like someone had repaired it while I was on the phone. They looked at me like I was crazy, told me to get some rest. I don't know why I didn't leave that night. Maybe I wanted to understand it. Maybe I was too far gone. Maybe they were right. I was getting used to it. So instead, I climbed into bed, left my phone camera recording on the dresser, and stared at the ceiling for hours. I heard it at 2:03 a.m. sharp, a click. Then the sound of someone crawling above me, slow, deliberate. A hand pressed against the drywall, directly over my head. And then, a whisper, clear as anything I've ever heard. Don't look up. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just cried silently as something shifted in the ceiling. And when morning came and I checked the footage, the video was gone, deleted. Only a new photo remained. My phone had saved one last thing, a low-angle picture of me, lying in bed, eyes wide open, mouth just starting to scream. I didn't leave my apartment the next day, not even to breathe fresh air. I just sat by the window with the blinds barely cracked, phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline, eyes flicking toward every creak in the floor and every gust that brushed against the old window panes. The photo had been deleted again, the one of me in bed, staring into the void. I didn't do it. I swear on whatever pieces of my sanity remained. It was just gone. Like it was never real. Like the memory itself was decaying while I still lived inside it. I tried to call the police again, but I stopped before I finished dialing. I already knew what they'd say. I wasn't being stalked, they'd say. I was cracking under stress, hallucinating, making it up. And honestly, maybe I was. But then why was I still finding things moved, things missing, things returned with small differences? My conditioner cap closed differently. My bedroom mirror was tilted by 1 degree. A crack appeared in a picture frame I hadn't touched in days. That night, I stayed up until 4 a.m. with a flashlight and a knife, determined to find the truth. If there were people in the walls, I'd catch them. I knew now that the walls weren't just insulation. They were layered with crawl spaces, hidden panels, hollow voids built into the building's bones. So I started knocking. Every surface, every floorboard. I followed the hollow sounds to the back of the kitchen where the fridge used to be before I moved it months ago. Behind it, I found a false wall, covered in cheap tile that didn't match the rest. I smashed it in with a hammer. Behind it was a tunnel, not just a crawl space this time, but a tunnel that led downward, deeper than the foundation should allow. The air coming from it was cold and smelled like wet cloth and old blood. I pointed my flashlight inside, and I swear I saw footprints, bare ones, leading inward. I don't know what made me step in. Curiosity? Desperation? Some twisted need to understand? I crawled through the tunnel for what felt like hours, the silence pressing against my ears so hard it hurt. I passed through tight wooden frames, broken beams, and decaying wallpaper that looked like it had once been a hallway. And then I heard it. Voices. Not whispers this time. Full voices, conversational, male and female. They sounded normal, like people talking at a dinner table. I followed them, slow and silent, until I reached an open chamber carved from the earth itself, lit by bare bulbs hanging from extension cords. It was a room, a real room, with furniture, a couch, a mattress, books, a shelf of VHS tapes, food wrappers, soda cans, but no people. Just the sound of talking, still playing from a speaker tucked into the wall, and pinned to the opposite side of the room, dozens of Polaroids of me, brushing my hair, eating cereal, sleeping in the tub, typing on my laptop, staring at the wall, each one labeled with timestamps, each one perfectly composed. And then I saw it. One last photo. It wasn't me. It was the girl before me, the one who visited. Her eyes were scratched out. Written underneath in smeared ink were the words, "She stopped reacting." I backed away slowly, bile rising in my throat, but as I turned to crawl back, I heard the panel behind me slide shut. I was trapped. I screamed, I pounded, no one came. The voices from the speaker changed, now they were mimicking me. My own voice distorted, saying things I never said. "Come inside. Don't be scared. We'll keep you." I don't know how long I was in there. Days, maybe more. I stopped tracking time after the flashlight died. I started talking to myself. And then, to them. Because eventually I wasn't alone. I heard them crawling, shifting, whispering just outside the edge of the lightless space. I never saw them fully, just fragments, eyes behind holes, fingers slipping through cracks, but I knew they were there, watching, breathing, feeding off the silence, the isolation. I made peace with dying in that tunnel. But then one day the panel opened again. Light flooded in, fresh air, a hand reached down, not pale or thin, but strong, real, alive. A maintenance worker had found me. Said they were doing repairs and heard something moving behind the walls. They pulled me out. I don't remember much after that, just EMTs, hospital lights, soft voices asking my name, checking my vitals. I told them everything. They didn't believe me. Called it a mental break, stress, isolation, trauma. They showed me pictures of the apartment, normal walls, no tunnels, no photos, no crawlspace. My phone was wiped, no audio files, no notes, nothing. They said I'd been missing for 2 weeks. When I returned to 3B to collect what was left of my things, the landlord was gone. The unit was locked. A sign on the front read, "Under renovation, do not enter." But late that night, I drove by one more time just to see it, and in the third-floor window I saw a silhouette, thin, pale, standing perfectly still behind the curtain, watching. And on my windshield, tucked under the wiper, was a fresh note typed in familiar font. "We liked you best when you didn't scream."